Good afternoon. My name's Kathy Hart. I'm the Associate Director and Curator of Academic Programming here at the museum. And I'm very excited to welcome you to this lecture this afternoon, which is being presented with Looking Back at Earth, Contemporary Environmental Photography from the Hood Museum of Art's collection. And although we're not open past 5 this evening, we'll be open till 9 tomorrow. So if any of you miss it, come back tomorrow if you haven't seen the exhibition so far. In January 2011, New York Times art critic Roberta Smith, writing about the exhibition of J. Henry Fair at the Gerald Peter Gallery in New York, referred to his work Industrial Scars as being the toxic sublime. She wrote, quote, "The vivid color photographs of J. Henry Fair lead to an uneasy double life as potent records of environmental pollution and as ersatz evocations of abstract painting. Information and form work together to devastating effect." When I saw his work for the first time at this exhibition, I was personally taken with the beautiful aesthetic of these abstract aerial landscapes and also stricken by their subjects. I had been working on assembling a collection of environmental photography for the Hood's collection so it could be used for teaching, and in particular with a very strong environmental studies department here as well as the photography department here at the college. J. Henry Fair's work brought up so many important and interesting issues. For instance, about the conundrum of the beautiful and the toxic being contained within the same image, or about the relationship between art and documentary photography. A third issue is the relationship between the activist artist and the work of art he or she produces. This last issue will be a major part of his lecture tonight. Or this afternoon, it's not night yet. Mr. Fair's work has been featured in segments on the Today Show, CNN, NPR's Marketplace, WDR German TV, as well in most major publications, including the New York Times, National Geographic, Vanity Fair, Rolling Stone, New York Magazine, Harper's Magazine, Smithsonian Magazine, and so forth. Additionally, his work travels around the world in fine art exhibitions at major museums, galleries, and educational institutions. In 2010, the students in the Hood Museum of Art's non-curricular Museum Collecting 101 course chose him as the artist whose work the museum should acquire for its collection and selected the work you will see upstairs in the exhibition. It's also on the cover of our current quarterly calendar, in case you have missed that. Mr. Fair has an active lecture schedule in which he presents photographic symposia to audiences in the U.S. and abroad. He also gives readers a first-hand look inside the important issues he studies, writing and blogging about art and the environment, and is a regular contributor to the National Resource Defense Council's On Earth magazine and the Huffington Post. Most recently, in November 2011, Mr. Fair was a guest speaker at the TED Talks conference on high energy in Berlin, Germany. And you can see that online if you wish. Mr. Fair's first book, The Day After Tomorrow, Images of Our Earth in Crisis, and there's a copy upstairs in the exhibition, was released in February 2011, published by Powerhouse Books in cooperation with Random House. In January 2012, his new multimedia piece, Das Lied von der Erde, was premiered in Germany by the Weimar Staatskapelle. This performance piece reimagines Gustav Mahler's classic orchestral work, pairing it with an animated series of Fair's electrifying environmental photographs. Please join me today in welcoming J. Henry Fair, whose talk today is titled Industrial Scars, The Art of Activism.
Thank you, Kathy. It's really a pleasure to be here, I can't tell you. Dartmouth is one of the great institutions in our country, and to be here is really quite an honor, and to be hanging in the museum is an honor as well. I think maybe we'll do first something about mercury pollution in the air and climate change, whether or not you believe in climate change. And can we turn off the lights, please? The largest single cause of mercury released into the environment is the burning of coal. Maybe you know this. So a little bit about what I'm going to do today. I try to establish two narratives when I talk. One with the pictures will tell a story, and another with what I say. Sometimes they will coincide, but other times they will not, which puts a bit of a demand on the audience for you to either appreciate the pictures as abstract art, what is art, or to query me at the end of the thing and say, hey, what was that picture we saw? But the gist of it is, I will explain most of what the pictures are. I'm one of those people who torments themselves. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah. Why you're sitting in the back, I don't know, but fine. I'm one of those people who torments themselves, even if I answer a question, and there are not many questions that can be answered, but even if I answer a question, I always end up coming back and asking it again. And this question of what is art is a big question for me, because I ask myself repeatedly, am I creating art? Am I creating reportage? What am I doing here? So with that in mind, we come back to this question, what is art? I mean, can art be a picture of shit? Pardon my, but I don't know how else to say it. That's what this is. It's pig feces from the factory farming of hogs, in which they keep thousands of hogs in small buildings, and that's where we get our bacon. And of course, the reason I take these pictures is to make us all think, okay, well, geez, is that really, do I want to support that? In this case, of course, the way, maybe you know about the factory farming of hogs, but they feed those animals a lot of drugs, and they spray them down with pesticides, and so we're eating that. And of course, we know we are what we eat. The next picture is really, really gross. So if you're easily grossed out, I recommend you close your eyes. I'll describe it first. It's a pig fetus floating in fecal matter, because of course these poor pigs live in these sheds, and everything, they live on a grate, and everything goes through the grate down to these giant lagoons of waste. So I will skip through it quickly. I've made more than one vegetarian out of this picture. And yes, it's pretty gross, and we support that. If we buy that bacon from the supermarket, we're supporting that, and we're eating that, which means we are that. And this is a wetland, right? Most of the pig farming in the U.S. happens in North Carolina, and this is a wetland next to that, next to one of those giant pig sheds, and of course, all of that fecal matter causes increased nitrogen in the water, which causes the algae to bloom, which sucks up all of the oxygen and therefore kills everything else in that water body. Before the Gulf spill made us forget about it, we were all very worried about the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, which is all basically the fertilizer running down the Mississippi and pouring out. But fortunately, BP took that off of our minds. We'll get back to that later. A lot of what I want people to come away with is the idea that, first off, my pictures are really about hope. They're not about despair. And I would like people to come away with the idea that we can change things. And it really isn't that often, and I don't like the term environmentalists, but often environmentalists are cast in the light of being draconian purists who would drag our country back to a darker age. And of course, I don't see it this way. I see environmentalists, I guess I count myself in that category, as wanting to push us into a new age of health and light and security for our children. That's, I think, a lot about what we will leave our children. And on that note, I will talk about toilet paper. What could be a more boring subject, right? but it might be the most important decision you make at the shopping trip. If we all changed the brand of toilet, and I should know this number, forgive me for not knowing this number. If we all changed the brand of toilet paper we bought, problem solved, forests saved. Do you like Animal Planet? You like to look at the wolves and the bears, the nice babies? You want to save those animals? Change the toilet paper you buy. Really, I'm not kidding. This is, I went up to northern Ontario to look at deforestation by one of the I usually don't, by the way, mention the names of the companies that I'm looking at, mostly because I want me, not to be a consumer. I want us to be citizens. I want us to spend our dollars responsibly. So this is where the world's largest paper company, whom I will not name, is cutting down old-growth boreal forests to make the brand of facial tissues, sorry, I almost slipped there, facial tissues and toilet paper. I mean, really, they are the largest brands. You have them in your house, and therefore you're supporting deforestation. I don't want to make you feel bad. I don't want, I'm not trying to say, okay, you are guilty, you are bad. No, I'm trying to say, hey, do we want to change this stuff? We can do this. And again, now, is this document or is this art? I think this is document. This is art. It's an old projector, so we're losing the detail in the whites. This is the waste treatment where they make the world's largest brand of facial tissues. Anybody want to make a guess? No, never mind. Don't go there. Don't go there. This one ran in National Geographic, and it's interesting. How do we separate this idea of art and reportage? And again, I think about this a lot, so forgive me. Let's talk about aluminum a little bit. Remember the Iceland economic crisis? And of course, what we know in the United States in our self-centered world is that somehow there was a run on the banks and all the Icelanders. Well, actually what happened, it's very interesting. One of the largest aluminum companies went to Iceland and said, Iceland is trying to market their hydropower. Aluminum is all about electricity. So one of the largest aluminum companies went to Iceland and said, we'll build an aluminum refinery in the north of your country, and we'll ship our bauxite up from Jamaica, where most bauxite comes from Jamaica and Brazil, and we'll process it there, getting free electricity. Nothing is free, of course. This, by the way, is bauxite waste. This one's in Baton Rouge. So they started building this giant aluminum refinery. And what happened is it was the largest capital project in Iceland. So it started to suck up all the capital in Iceland. And so, of course, what happened is interest rates in Iceland start to go up. Money starts to pour in from Europe. The Icelanders are saying, yeah, this is good. The money's coming in. We're flipping our apartments like New Yorkers. Let's take a trip to New York and spend a little money. And of course, all of that sort of went until it crashed down. And nobody knows about that aluminum connection with Iceland. So I have a lot of partners. A lot of people support me in what I do. And these are some of them. There's some pilots who bless their hearts. They fly me wherever I want to go. The two that come to mind in the north, a fellow named Bob Keller, and in the south, a fellow named Tom Hutchings, basically fly me wherever I want to go. And it's really, I'm so grateful. So as I see it, we live on a little rock, right? I mean, a lot of people sort of wax metaphysical. I'm not that way. And we had an interesting conversation at lunch about this. I don't really care about saving the little bears and the wolves. I mean, I do, but I really don't. I'm into this to save us. Because really, if we save those bears and wolves, well, to do that, we have to save their habitat. And saving their habitat means saving ourselves, because their habitat is what provides us with the free services that we get. Clean air and clean water. These are so valuable. We don't place any value on these things that this very complex system of which we're a part provides us. But, so yeah, change your toilet paper. These are, again, this question of, is it art, is it document? We're looking down at the top of a giant oil tank here. And you'll see another one which is even prettier than this. It's become one of my new obsessions. And they just rust, those oil tanks. I will mention one name. It's a pet peeve of mine. The Koch brothers. This is one of their refineries in Texas City. So I'm going to touch on mountaintop removal mining. I love maps, so you can see roughly where it is, south of Charleston, West Virginia. Now this is, the Appalachians are the water source for most of the southeast United States. And we've basically cut down about 500 mountains. That's a big number. We've destroyed, we've taken 500 mountains off the planet. That's really so that we can leave our lights burning at night. Yeah, I mean, 1 million acres have been lost to mountaintop removal mining. Here I was lucky enough actually to catch the blast. Again, I should know the amount of ammonium nitrate they use per day in West Virginia. I don't. It's an awful lot. A lot of people are killed by fly rock. The coal companies are exempted from liability because, of course, it's an act of God if one of those rocks hits someone when it comes down. We had an interesting conversation this morning. We met in the museum and talked, and someone said, well, okay, well, you know, these are big questions. Where would you start? And I thought about it, and I said, you know, I think the first place to start is taking away subsidies from oil and gas, from oil, gas, and coal. Let's just start there. Sure, the questions are big. Sure, converting our economy to a sustainable economy it's not an easy, you know, it's not a mistake. It's not an easy thing. But let's level the playing field maybe. Let's say, okay, you know, take away the oil and gas is well established, oil, gas, and coal. No subsidies, sorry. You know, fight for yourself. But so that's my solution. Problem solved. These are coal slurry. This is the liquid that's used to wash coal after it's mined. And of course it's mixed with a lot of water, a lot of chemicals and nasty business, and quite often, if you see here, it's fascinating. I'm flying around photographing this stuff, and you don't always know what you're shooting. I suspect that they're creating a giant impoundment to hold coal slurry here. Because you can see it is literally a bowl. What happens, of course, is they'll fill that end up. Do I have a cursor? I do not have a cursor. They'll fill that end up with dirt, essentially, and fill this up with this toxic liquid, and then along will come a heavy rainstorm and burst that dam, and all of that toxic slurry will go down the valley and wash away the homes there. But again, they're exempt from liability because it's an act of God. And here they're basically remediating. So they cut down the mountain like Jimi Hendrix, chop down the mountain with the edge of my hand, and their only obligation for remediation is to plant grass seed. So they're taking an old growth forest. Again, this is so we can leave our lights on. They're taking an old growth forest and taking off the forest, chopping down the mountain, scraping up the coal, and then leveling it out and planting grass seed. And to add insult to injury, the grass seed is an invasive grass seed from China. It's called hydroseeding. It's the same stuff they spray on the side of the highways. And that's what this guy is doing, is he's spraying this mixture of hydroseed and of fertilizer and grass seed. And yes, the colors are real. I mean, the reproduction of the projector is not dead on accurate, but yes, the colors are real. So back to my philosophical questions that keep me up at night. This is, it's interesting about extractive industries. They never enrich the places. They enrich Wall Street. They never enrich the places from whence they are extracted. We'll talk at the end of this about hydrofracking. I don't know if it's as big an issue up here as it is in New York, but be afraid. This is Twilight, West Virginia. Looks like Twilight, West Virginia, doesn't it? I was fascinated, and I was so fortunate. I was here with James Hansen. I don't know if you know who James Hansen is. He's the NASA scientist who kind of figured out the climate change issue in the 80s and was one of the first people to start waving the flag about it. And he and I took a road trip down to West Virginia because we have a mutual friend who is whose land is surrounded by mountaintop removal mining. So I started this project wanting to make pictures. I had this foreboding of where are we going? What are we doing? And I wanted to make pictures that told this story. And I'm also fascinated by machines. I mean, it's interesting. The works of man are, in some ways, our highest pinnacle. You'll see a drill rig, an offshore drill rig in a minute. And call me crazy, these things are beautiful, right? I mean, so I have this desire to make a statement about what's happening to these natural systems that support us, and B, this fascination with the beauty of machines. And so I was starting to take these pictures to try to tell this story. And again, are they art? They somehow, I like them. I mean, I love this image. This is a refinery on the Gulf of, on the Mississippi River Delta that actually after Katrina was closed for 173 days. Oh, and by the way, they want to ship that tar sands oil down to the refineries on the Gulf of Mexico. Let's call it Hurricane Alley. And of course, meteorologists tell us that the hurricanes will increase. So they want to build that Keystone pipeline down to the Gulf of Mexico and process tar sands oil. That doesn't make much sense to me. But anyway, let's go on. We've all seen too much of this, right? And our eyes just her eyes are already closed, or they were a minute ago. They don't really grab us. I mean, it's a documentation of deforestation, but it's just that. It's not art. It's document. And then I was flying on a red-eye flight one time. Again, I apologize for the reproduction quality. It's really a beautiful. One feels the fog on the river and the cooling towers poking through the fog. And I said, "That's it. Just get above it." And so that's exactly what I did. I went down to New Orleans and hired a plane and flew up Cancer Alley, which is this region of the Mississippi River between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and got these amazing pictures of stuff. And I had no idea what I was looking at. And I went back to New York with these pictures, and this was before Katrina, and it was before Inconvenient Truth. And so the editors at the magazine said, "Yeah, it's kind of interesting. What is it?" Well, I said, "I don't know what it is." This is actually ozone hole central. This is where CFCs are made, or actually now it's HCFCs, which, by the way, are also a tremendous. Do we know what HCFCs are? Propellants that are used in refrigerants, air conditioners. Basically, anytime you need in spray cans, propellants. They are, you may remember the Montreal Protocol. We as a world, we acted to right a wrong. We noticed that the ozone was being eaten up by these CFCs, and we switched to HCFCs. Well, it turns out HCFCs are only marginally better, and they are tremendous climate change gas. And this is where they are made. There was a company called Allied Chemical. There I go, mentioning a name again. And Allied Chemical was doing all kinds of nasty things. And then Richard Nixon, under pressure from a Democratic Congress, and decided to pass the Clean Air Act. And so, yes, let me get back on track. Decided to pass the Clean Air Act. Where was I? Help me out here. Sorry, I'm like Lenny Bruce. My head goes, I'll come back to it. So back to the Koch brothers. You know, I went to Lincoln Center, and one of the Koch brothers supports the ballet theater, and I couldn't bear to go in. I just really, I couldn't. So if you want to support the Tea Party, you all know about the Koch brothers, right? So if you want to support the Tea Party, I recommend you buy Brawny paper towels, because this is Georgia Pacific. There I go, mentioning names again. I promised I wouldn't do it. And the Koch Energy owns Georgia Pacific. Brawny is one of its brands, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I'll stop now. I won't mention any more names. So now we're going to talk about coal ash. And that's the picture that's in the hood. This is in my home state of South Carolina. This is just south of Charleston at a power plant. Okay, I promised I wouldn't mention any more names, and it won't mean anything to you anyway. This is one of the many coal ash impoundments that is known to be leaching arsenic into the groundwater. We don't really think about this stuff when we turn on the lights. You don't really think, okay, I'm turning on the light, that means arsenic in somebody's groundwater, right? I mean, who thinks about it? Other than me, who thinks about that stuff? But it's true, coal ash is a tremendous problem. You may remember 2 years ago, Christmas, there was the largest toxic spill on American mainland, which was in Kingston, Tennessee, where one of the TVA plants spilled all of its coal ash waste. Is this ringing a bell? It was a major disaster. This is it, and you can see how the coal ash impoundment burst, and basically it filled up the Emory River. Fortunately, it was Christmas time, and nobody was on the river, so nobody died. We produce 140 million tons of coal ash a year. The number's a little bit in dispute. I've read everywhere from 120 to 150, and we're running out of places to put it. It's a big battle right now. If you want to do some good, call up your senator and congressman and say, hey, let the EPA regulate coal ash. It's their job. It's our largest waste stream in this country. The EPA should regulate this. But so we're running out of places to put it, so industry has come up with a brilliant idea. They've found a new place to store coal ash. Has anybody renovated their house in the last couple of years? Put up any sheetrock? Did I mention that coal ash was full of arsenic, uranium, boron, mercury, cadmium? They're also using it as fertilizer, paint, roofing tiles, carpet. Anyway, so selenium is another product of coal ash. This is one of the places, this is right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. This is right next to the airport. This is one of the high hazard coal ash dumps. Look at those nice suburban homes. They probably don't realize that if and when that coal ash impoundment breaks, it will come rushing into their living rooms. Is it art or is it journalism? I ask you. This is one of my favorite power plants. The blue is not quite right, but it's essentially right. We're seeing sky reflected in the water that's standing on this. This is actually bottom ash, which is, as you might suspect, it's the ash from the boiler. This one is called Big Cajun. Actually, the power company that owns Big Cajun is trying to improve their practices, and you've got to respect that. I mean, we can't vilify, right? I'm not here to vilify a power company. Sorry, it'll come back to me. Duke Energy is saying that they're going to change the way they do things. We've done things a certain way for a long time. We're knowing better now. So it's not time to vilify and to, it's time to say, okay, we know better now, let's change the way we do things. And I believe that as citizens, we are the ones who have the power to do something about that. And again, it can be as simple as changing your toilet paper. It can be as simple as buying your food from, I want to pay more for food. I want to buy my food from a farmer that lives near me, and I want her to be happy. And I want her to live a good life, and I want her children to go to a good school. So, and these things, they seem so small, they make a big difference. Bicycle whenever you can. This stuff matters. Turn off the lights when you leave the room. We don't need to live in the darkness, but why waste electricity? Why pay extra money? This is in Germany, these last two pictures, and this is one of the largest carbon emitters in Europe. And I was fascinated I'm always trying to follow the story. I always want to know the beginning right to the end. Where does the coal come from and where does the ash go? And I was fascinated. There's a story behind this, actually. There's a crazy Dutchman who flies a kite, and he was bugging me for years. He said, Henry, come on, fly with me, fly with me. So we go on this very cold day last year in November. It was a beautiful day, and literally it was a kite. So I'm sitting, a kite with a cage under it. So I'm sitting on the front of the kite, and Leo is behind me. And we had to drive around until we could find a proper place to take off from, because it wasn't, it's not a plane, so you're not really flying from an airport. Now, fortunately, I carry an ancient GPS, and I have a habit of marking the airport where I fly from. So we get up and we fly, and we go over this giant coal mine, giant, you have no idea how big. And we take great pictures, and we're coming back, and so I said, okay, Leo, I've had enough, let's go home. Sun was setting, it's getting really cold, I'm getting numb. So Leo says, okay, home is that way. And I looked at my GPS. I happen to be an old sailor, so I'm pretty good with this stuff. And I said to myself, well, he knows what he's doing. I must have made a mistake. So, and this kite doesn't fly very fast. So we're flying along, and I'm looking, and I said, Leo, we're going the wrong way here. And I had visions, and at this point it's getting dark. I had visions of coming down in a field and wrapping myself and Leo up together in this giant kite, and it was not a pretty picture. So fortunately, my GPS was right, and we made it back to the airfield in time to, yes. This is tar sands. Do we know what the tar sands are? America's already getting 10% of its gas from the tar sands. Projections are within the next 10 years, we'll be getting 20% of our gas. Basically, we're ravaging the north of Ontario. We're digging up one of the, Alberta. We're digging up one of the world's most valuable wetlands, which also contains bitumen saturated in the soil. And this is what the excavation looks like. And then we boil it with natural gas, which is why Canada is using up all of its natural gas on the tar sands. Canada used to be the largest exporter of natural gas to the US, but fortunately, we have hydrofracking now. So we boil it, and then we spin it in a centrifuge and extract this very heavy tar, and then we're going to now build the Keystone XL pipeline and ship it all the way down from northern Alberta down to the Gulf of Mexico and process it there. Does that seem like a good idea? Not to me. And of course, you remember the pipeline spill in Kalamazoo, Michigan last year, which I forget how many gallons of, or how many barrels of oil. That was tar sands oil. And tar sands oil contains a lot of sand, so it's very abrasive. So it's very hard on these pipelines. you can expect more of these spills. And this sort of illustrates the process. They first strip off the topsoil and whatnot, and they use that to make the dams around the toxic lakes of tailings. And once the soil is stripped off, you can see these little bulldozers are actually pushing the bitumen-saturated dirt down to the giant steam shovels, which are loading them into the wheelbarrows. And here we've got an overhead view of that. Interestingly, they're electrically powered not steam shovels at all, they're electrically powered shovels. I guess they've decided that's more efficient than diesel. You can see the scale of one of the refineries. This is the Suncor refinery. One of the things that fascinates me is these giant mountains of sulfur. It's a very dirty petroleum, and in the refining process, they extract sulfur. Look at those and remember them. First, I'm going to ask one of my philosophical questions. Should art have meaning? Thank you. Pause on that. So this is looking down at the side of one of those pyramids of sulfur, and this is looking straight down. The yellow's not quite right, but it's close. And you know, this is a lot of what I do is research and trying to figure stuff out. What's the answer? And it took me a long time on this one because I'm a little stupid. The red, which looks like the blood of the earth, doesn't it? It's great. I circled this. The pilot thought I was crazy. This was not one of my regular pilots. So we circled, to get this picture, I probably circled 20 times. Because you know, you're only in the right spot for 1 second to get this picture. So the red, sulfur is the only element that A, increases viscosity as the temperature goes up, very interesting, and B, it's red in its molten state. So that's liquid sulfur coming from the refinery being pumped to the top of these pyramids. And here, that was actually a place. So what they do is they stack these, they have these walls, containment walls, that they stack along the edge, and then once they've filled up to the top of that wall, they go and they move it in a little bit, and that's why it's in the shape of a pyramid. And this would be where one of those walls fell away, and that red liquid sulfur ran down the side of this pyramid. How do I wish I had been there when that happened? Imagine that red liquid running down the side of that giant pyramid. Can't have everything in this life. This is the tailings pond. So the tar sands process entails millions and millions of gallons of water to wash all of this very dirty, bitumen-infused soil. And so they have these giant lakes of tailings, they call them, and basically it's water and chemicals and sludge. And of course, this is a real route for migrating waterfowl, and they land in here all the time and die a horrible death, but you know, who cares? They're only birds. You can see somewhere in this picture one of the scarecrows that they set these scarecrows in these tailings ponds, and it would give you some sense of scale. I don't see it now. Suffice it to say, this is giant. A person would be like that here. I mean, these are giant, giant lakes of sludge. And here we're back to my, I love finding these motifs and repeating them. This is looking down onto the top of one of these oil tanks, these giant floating roof oil tanks. Actually, the Times published this picture, and it received a lot of criticism. Oh, well, that couldn't be, the colors can't be. So I actually got a letter from the guy who made this tank, the guy who went around the world making floating roof tanks, and we established a very nice dialogue, Axel White. And he said, yeah, that's a floating roof tank that's doing its job. The rust is no problem. Don't worry about it. And he even told me how much this tank, he calculated for me how much this tank holds. I have those numbers written down in a database. So, moving on, down to the Gulf of Mexico, where we're no longer worried about the circle, what's the word I'm looking for? The zone of hypoxia, the dead zone, and hypoxia means without oxygen, of course, and that's because when we add nitrogen to an aquatic system, the nitrogen promotes an algae bloom, which sucks up all the oxygen and therefore kills all the other aquatic life in the system. But that's not what's going on here. What's going on here is this nice plane is spraying Corexit. What a wonderful name that is. How many people here like that name? I love that name. That is the most Orwellian word I have ever heard. So, I assume you know that Corexit is a dispersant. And basically, without all of that Corexit, we would have all been down there protesting on the beaches of Alabama and Florida because those beaches would have been covered with oil sludge. Instead, now the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico is covered with oil sludge because Corexit did its job and dissolved it all. Yes. So, when this thing happened, I was literally getting on a plane to Europe, and I was kicking myself. My first big exhibit in Europe, and I was thinking, but I should be down in Mobile. Mobile is actually the airport that's closest to the Gulf spill. So immediately upon my return, I contacted South Wings, which is one of the pilot groups that fly me, and I said, do you have anybody down there? And they said, yes, we've got this guy, Tom Hutchings, in Mobile. Now, I happen to have family in Mobile, being from the Deep South. So it was very nice for me to also be able to go and stay with my family, and they were very supportive. And Tom turned out to be a real hero. He flew me out at night. There's no pilot that will fly you over the open ocean at night. They don't want to do it because, and it took me, I didn't understand why, because if the engine fails, they can't see the water. So if the engine fails when you're out over the water at night, you can't make that emergency landing because you can't see the water. So you don't know where. This night, fortunately, we had a big moon, and Tom was willing to go out and do it. And it was quite a thrill to fly. You know, we had flown over this 6 or 7 times already, but to do it at night with these roaring fire, I can't imagine the people who worked on those rigs. It was so hot. You'd fly over this thing at 1,000 feet and you would wince because of the heat. And what they're doing here, of course, no one talked about this. You may remember we had this gushing well at the bottom of the ocean, and BP, in their ever-ready preparedness, kept trying to figure out what to do with it. God knows why they didn't figure this out before they had the problem, but so, and they were essentially dropping funnels on top of it. I don't know if you followed this as closely as I did, but the lower marine riser package was essentially a giant funnel. The idea being, let's try to capture what's gushing out of here and bring it up to the top where we can at least get some of it. They weren't able to get much of it, actually. The volume that they were capturing was quite small. And what they're doing here is burning off the methane. Now, what no one talks about is the fact that so much methane was percolating out of the water during this crisis. And of course, methane is a tremendous climate change gas. So no one was talking about the climate change impact of this crisis. And here you can see the solids that were leaking out of the, I mean, you can see they're not catching any of it, relatively. The oil was many different colors. The color's a little off here. It's a little too dark. These fishing boats are skimming to pick up the oil. Back to those philosophical questions again. We were having over lunch this question of what is beauty, and And it occurred to me, is beauty always, because it often comes up, well, Henry, your pictures are beautiful, but they're horrible. And so I thought, I wonder, is beauty always connected to nostalgia? Is beauty always connected to something we know? You know, a flower is beautiful, but it's beautiful because we know it. So here you can see after they've skimmed for the oil, they're burning it, along with whatever marine flora and fauna got caught in those nets. And I also love the finding these Rorschachs. This is, you know, we spent hours just zooming over the water looking for patterns in the oil. This one reminds me of, it almost feels like an infant spewing oil. Never mind, it says, I guess Rorschachs say more about the viewer than about the Rorschach itself. So yeah, that's what we zoomed over and looked for, these patterns in the oil. And again, it was every color you could imagine. And there's also, you can see, it's below the surface and on the surface. And it was, photographically, it was a real challenge because there's tremendous amount of haze, and there's all this reflection, and the Gulf of Mexico is so blue. So it was really, I'm using a polarizer, and I'm trying to cut through the haze and trying to get a feel, what's more interesting, what's floating on the surface or what's floating below the surface? You know, again, I think of the people that were out there killing themselves to stop this crisis, and I have to think of them with the greatest respect, because, you know, they're just people like us that are trying to make a living, and I know that it was harsh out there. I could feel how harsh it was from 1,000 feet, so I can't imagine. This is one of the rigs that was drilling. There were two rigs, if you remember, drilling the relief wells. I would love to get on this rig. I would, because I'm fascinated by technology and by, there's a beauty to this. And I mean, you know, it looks like just a giant machine, but I don't know, I find them amazing. Here the oil is coming into Barataria Bay, which is the giant wildlife sanctuary that is just to the west of the Mississippi River Delta. Because of those circular currents in the Gulf, it was the first one to be hit by the oil. And yes, it's a giant pelican rookery. I love pelicans. Those pelicans do not look very happy to me. But maybe I'm just projecting. And this one, you know, it's interesting. You don't always know what of your stuff is the good stuff. And the editor of the art director of the book said, we were looking for that sort of lead-off shot. And the art director said, this is the shot. I said, oh no, it's really not such a great shot. So I had to go home and live with it over the weekend, and she was absolutely right. Well, she said it with a German accent. Maybe that helped. I don't. It sounds more authoritative, you know, when the art director is German, and yes. And you know, I do a lot of work in Germany, and they sort of have a bit of a superiority complex because they make things really well and whatnot. But so I figured I'd better go and take them down a notch. No, just kidding. But you know, it's interesting. We're all making mistakes. Hey, my carbon footprint is bigger than almost anybody's. I fly around the world. I hold up my hand and bow my head. But this is where the Germans are digging up their country for brown coal, which is a horrible fuel. I mean, lignite brown coal. It's 65% water, so you got to use a tremendous percentage of your energy. Oh, and by the way, carbon capture. If anybody says, oh, you know, clean coal, carbon capture, just laugh. To capture the carbon from burning coal takes about 40% of the energy produced by burning that coal. So carbon capture is a joke. Just thought I'd throw that out there for you. This is a bucket wheel excavator. The Germans called them baggers. And can you believe that, you know, it's very interesting. In the United States, they would never let me into a coal mine. They would beat me to a pulp and leave me by the side of the road. Really, I mean, this happens. In Germany, a friend of mine is a journalist for Der Spiegel, and he told me about going into this coal mine in the east, and I said, I want to do that. So he said, fine, here's the number for the press rep for it's Vattenfall, which is a big Swedish conglomerate. And again, I try not to vilify. Vattenfall, which owns these horrible brown coal mines, and they bought them from the East Germans right after reunification, and they're desperate to get out of them. I mean, there are, again, we should talk about hope. It's so easy to, these pictures are not about despair, they're about hope. They're about saying, we have done things wrong in the past, and now it's time to start changing the way we do things. And we need to do it in a way that floats all the boats. And there's a lot of good stuff happening out there. I mean, look at the amount of electricity we're starting to generate with wind and solar. Things are changing, and we need to continue to support that change. This is the marks left by the bogger. There's a great story here too. So I'm photographing this guy, this bogger, this bucket, and it's giant. I mean, you can't even imagine how big it is. Actually, I wasn't photographing. He's taking overburden. He's taking dirt to get down to the coal. Here we see the coal. So I'm photographing this one, this bucket wheel excavator, and I'm photographing and backpedaling. And again, brown coal, it's like a swamp. Brown coal is really it's muck. So I'm backpedaling and photographing, and one of those giant machines is not moving that fast, but moving towards me, and I'm sort of backing away and taking pictures. And all of a sudden, I sank to my knees in this, if you can imagine, this swampy, nasty muck. Well, all of the machine operators practically fell off the machine laughing. There was no danger, really. I was interested in the difference in liability concept between Germany. In America, they wouldn't have let me anywhere near this thing. Fascinating. And he's spreading the overburden. You must first dig off the earth on top of whatever you're mining and get rid of it. And so that's what he's doing. He's spreading the overburden to the other side of the depleted side of the mine. And these are patterns in the over. I love finding this stuff. And again, I apologize for it's really a beautiful image of these back and forth patterns. And it's basically dirt that's been spread. And here's another one. And this is, I love this conveyor. I still am in shock that they let me into this. And here, this is in the generating room. If you can imagine, this would never happen in the US. I mean, this is where the giant generator was, generating electricity for Berlin. So, and this is that same power plant that's one of that I showed you the coal ash from at the beginning. It's called Fremmersdorf. And this one's called Neurath. And this one, Bobby Kennedy, he's really such a great environmentalist. And like all artists, he refines what he does. I mean, Beethoven, he did the same piece over and over and over again, right? I mean, you listen to one Beethoven piece, you've heard them all. And Bobby Kennedy has this great speech that he gives about environmentalism really being, it's our heritage we're talking about. And this shot really speaks to me about that. You can see that coal mine is coming towards this old German town. And it speaks to me about that intrusion of, and in a minute we're going to talk about hydrofracking. And do y'all know what hydrofracking is? Good. For those who don't know, it's the extraction of natural gas from the layer of shale, which is about a mile below the surface. Hydrofracking is a perfect example of this encroachment on our heritage. So in Pennsylvania, where hydrofracking is running rampant, you have these farmers, and again, back to food, you have these farmers who basically can't support themselves because America has driven the price of food down to commodity level. And so all of a sudden these farmers are faced with this Hobbesian choice of okay, you can lease your land to the gas drilling companies, but they're going to poison your water and turn your farm into an industrial zone. or you can go bankrupt. Let me think, which is, either way, we leave our children nothing, or we leave our children a despoiled industrial zone. Anyway, so hydrofracking, it's a big battle in New York right now. Cuomo, who wants to be president, and is setting himself up to allow the gas companies to start drilling in the Catskills, which is the watershed for New York City. For those who don't know, as we go, I'll give you a little background. This is the Catskills. So hydrofracking involves drilling down to the shale layer and then horizontal drilling to get as much exposure to that shale layer as possible, and then using millions of gallons of water and chemicals at extreme pressure to fracture that shale and release the natural gas that's stored there. That's the basics of the process. It involves several stages. Here we see farmland that is now industrial zone. And look at all these pipelines that are being cut. And of course, natural gas, the EIA, Energy Information Agency, has basically said, okay, well, America is going to move to natural gas. And they're basing that on this expectation of high production volume from hydrofracking. Now, a hydrofracked well really doesn't produce, it's not like a traditional natural gas well where you're tapping into a giant pocket of natural gas and it produces natural gas for years. No, these hydrofracked wells, if you can imagine drilling down into a layer of rock and trying to fracture that rock with water pressure, you're not going to fracture a giant cavity. You're basically just going to fracture what's around your drill pipe. So each of these wells really doesn't produce so much gas. This is a pipeline that's being dug in the endless mountains of Pennsylvania. So it's two stages. We have the drill rig. He's drilling down and then drilling horizontally into this layer of shale, which is about a mile below the Earth's surface. That's the first stage, and it involves its own damage, its own pollution. This is the tailings, the drilling muds and the cuttings from the drilling stage. And these layers of shale also have uranium and radium in it. So when you drill and you're bringing back up these rock shavings, they are radioactive. And they also are mixed with all of these drilling muds, which are chemicals and heavy metals, which are used to lubricate the drill bits. So you have these open pits of radioactive heavy metals. So that's the first stage, and this is another shot of one of those drill pits. And of course, you're drilling down through the aquifer. It's very important because how many of you have concrete in your basement? If you have a basement, you probably have concrete in the basement. And let me guess, that concrete has cracks in it, right? All concrete cracks. I'm a construction man. I know about this stuff. All concrete cracks. So when the gas companies say, oh, no, we put a concrete collar around the drill pipe. Excuse me? And it's a 1-inch concrete collar? Give me a break. So here we're still in the stage of drilling, but they're filling up this reservoir. You can see the tractor trailers coming in and filling up this reservoir with water. Am I an artist or am I a propagandist? What's the deal? Sorry. But it gives you some sense of how much water is used on each of these wells. And it begs the next question, which is water depletion. This is a tremendously water-hungry process. I dwell on it because it's such a big issue. I mean, it's really, and America's basing its future on hydrofracked natural gas, and it's a really bad idea. We'll talk about the climate change impact in a minute. But the farmhouse up there would fit into this reservoir. I mean, that's how much, millions and millions of gallons per well per frac. So the volume of water, enough, it's fascinating stuff. Nobody adds up the numbers from beginning to end. if you add up all of the permits that have been issued for fracking wells, and then say, okay, how much water does each well need? It's more than the flow of the Delaware River, which is where they're getting their water. So they're going to drain the Delaware River for hydrofracked natural gas. So now we're at the fracking stage. So these are the compressor trucks backed up to the wellhead, and you can see they've got a manifold here, that blue manifold, and the wellhead is basically right here. And of course, if you can imagine the pressure of all of these compressor trucks pressurizing this system, then you can be fairly safe to assume that accidents are regular occurrences. And they are. And if you can imagine all of these compressors pressurizing this system with all of this water mixed with all of these chemicals, and then all of a sudden, maybe the manifold breaks, the green things are the wellheads. One of those valves pops off and you have a geyser of toxic liquid shooting up into the air and then running down into the stream. And that one happens to be right next to a wetland. Go figure. Generally, when you see a flare, it means there's been a problem. I don't know this, but right before we did this flight with the great Bob Keller, thank you, Bob. Bob's one of those other pilots that when I call, he comes and says, where do you want to fly? Bless his heart. This was, when we did this flight, there had just been a major accident. I suspect this was the site of the accident. I don't know that. But when you see a flare, it's indicative that there has been a problem. Hydrofracking, there's another thing. How do you photograph global warming? You know, I mean, here we are in a country where we don't even agree that global warming is an issue. The hydrofracking process, because of course, at every stage there's leakage. So when you pressurize this well with water, then you have to burp all that water out of there. And during this process, methane leaks out. And of course, methane is a tremendous climate change gas. And then at every stage, all of these pipelines and compressor stations, they all have leaks. So there's a recent study by a professor named Howarth, which says that on a 20-year time span, and this is fascinating stuff, on a 20-year time span, hydrofracked natural gas has a larger climate change footprint than coal. So anyway, this is the last picture. It's one of my favorites, and it speaks to me. The artists in the crowd will know who Alberto Giacometti was. He's definitely one of my favorite artists, and he was very much about the alienation of modern man from. Well, I think he was more about the alienation of modern man. This issue of our alienation from the wild is a big issue for me. And again, not because I do care about the little wolves and the little bears. Yes, they're very nice and all. But what I really care about is us and our children. And if we can change our behavior a little bit, and I don't even think it needs to be draconian, then I think we can save the wild and thus leave a nice place for our children. And that's it. If you have any questions, I'm ecstatic to answer them. I answered all the questions already? Fine, let's go have a drink. Anybody? Comments?
What type of camera are you using? Just 35 millimeter?
Yeah, because I'm flying in an airplane and sticking my head out the window, I'd love to use a larger format camera, but yeah, it's a high-end digital camera, but it's nothing that special. And long lenses. I'm a bit of a photographic purist, so the picture I take is the picture I print. I don't crop once, so it's a hard job, and a lot of times we fly and we circle. But yeah, it's a Canon. I'd love to go back to Leica, but we'll see if Leica will come out with a digital camera. Yes, sir.
Is it difficult to separate yourself emotionally from some of the things you've seen?
I'm very good at shutting down the emotional response. And the pressure is so high when I'm doing one of these shoots that you don't really have time for thinking. You know, and it's all about, well, you're a photographer, you know, you're moving so fast, and you have to be so focused on what you're doing. You know, is the aperture right? Is the shutter speed right? You know, what about the polarizing film? You know, you really have, so there's no time for contemplating the horror or anything. You just have to take the pictures, and then. But I'm also very good at de-emotionalizing.
Delaying it, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I feel this stuff very greatly, but you know, I mean, that's what I do. I do it every day, so, and I live with it every day, so. But it makes me a bit of a tiresome guest, I will tell you. I'm trying to improve. You know, imagine the guest that comes to your house and looks at what kind of toilet paper you're using. You don't want that person coming and turns off your lights. You know, you all of a sudden you turn around. Wait a minute, that light was off. Oh God. Anyway, yes, sir.
You show these beautiful pictures of these horrible events, but what is the alternative? I mean, what paper are you going to? I mean, it's just that the population of the world is getting so big. There's more and more demand for energy and so forth. So everybody's looking for shortcuts for things, and you come up with these new ideas. Supposedly they're going to be less. There's a less of an effect on the environment. They turn out to be worse, which you're pointing
Like
out.
the HCFCs.
It's very frustrating. I mean, nobody ever has a good. You can point out all the bad things, but so what? What do you do about it?
Well, for me, you know, as I've really dove, it doesn't work. Anyway, well, and I love English. I love the language. As I have immersed myself in these issues, I have had to change my own behavior. And of course, what does that mean? That means I carry a handkerchief. I don't use Kleenex. I won't drink out of plastic. I won't buy plastic. I buy my food from a local farmer. You think about it, and suddenly there's a lot you can do. I mean, I'm lucky. I live in New York City, so I don't need a car. But you know, everything you do really, okay, you know, cut down on your meat consumption. Meat is a tremendous environmental problem. There's actually a lot we can, and the good things are happening. Back to hydrofracking, we got this major, what seemed like, and it's funny, sometimes the most important things seem so obscure. One of the things that's a major issue about hydrofracking is the liability, and the fact that mortgages don't allow there to be industrial activity on a mortgaged residential lot. Now this is, I just worked on an article with a lawyer in New York who wrote really a groundbreaking article for the New York Bar Association magazine, where she said this is a major problem, that all these landowners are leasing their land for this industrial activity, and that's in violation of their mortgages. So just this week, one of the insurance companies, and I forget which one, I should know, said, you know what? We're not going to renew insurance on land where there's hydrofracking. This is major. That's a game changer. You know, suddenly one insurance company has said that, then all of a sudden the mortgage companies are going to have to say, oh, wait a minute, because, you know, banks don't want to lend on something that there's no insurance on. So suddenly it's going to all come crashing back on those gas companies, and they will have to, okay, fine, so you self-insure. But that's a game changer. So there's a lot of good stuff happening, and we have to keep that in mind. And you know, I'm a real believer in the ability of one person to make change. So, you know, yeah, change the toilet paper you buy. Buy your food from a local farmer. These are very important things, and that changes the world. You know, the one little thing that you do changes the world.
Have you ever had any legal problems getting some of these pictures? Or
I'm usually gone before I'm in trouble. I have had the FBI waiting for me once or twice, but you know, I'm pretty transparent. I mean, what I'm doing is I'm making art. I'm not, or is it document? I can't remember. But it's not useful to anybody with bad intent. I won't even say the T word, by the way. There are a couple of words I won't say, and the T word is one of them, because I don't even, you never know who's listening, and I'm pretty sure they're listening to me. And maybe that's an honor. But yes, I don't say the T word. And I'm not one of them. I'm an artist. And what I'm doing is not useful to anybody with bad intent. And, you know, violence never works. You know, what works is changing people's hearts and minds. And so, yes, I've had some run-ins, but I'm sure I'm on a watch list, but, you know, they haven't stopped me at the border yet. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any interest in actually taking photographs of some of the positive change? Some of which
Yes.
is happening at a landscape or really large scale?
Actually, I'm talking to the museum. What did you say at the end of your question?
Some of it is happening at the landscape scale, so you still could do these photographs that you do aerially, which I think that bird's eye view has.
Yes,
a lot
and
of visual power in that.
I've done some pictures of wind farms and whatnot. They haven't made it into my presentation because I haven't gotten the powerful image. I'm working on an exhibit with the museum in Salzburg, and they really want to include positive. And so I think what we'll do is Salzburg is powered by a lot of hydropower. Don't get me started on hydropower. Hydropower is, you know, everything has a downside, and I've read an interesting article which says that there's a big climate change impact of hydropower because, of course, when a water reservoir goes down in the summer, and then plants grow up around the perimeter of that reservoir, and then that water comes back up and submerges those plants rot anaerobically. And what happens when something rots anaerobically? You know, it releases methane, and that methane, anyway. Yes, sir.
Tag along that same line, you may have known that there was a protest yesterday against erecting a wind farm in Vermont, and people have been concerned about the
I did not know.
Cape Cod. So maybe there is a place, because they don't like the way it makes the landscape look.
Everything has a downside. And do we complain about, and I know there's also a deforestation issue about deforesting ridgelines for windmills. That's a toughie. I mean, for the Kennedys at Cape Cod, I say get over it. You know, put those damn windmills out in the water where they're not. I mean, they're really not doing any harm. The issue on a ridgeline in Vermont, you know, that's a little tougher. It's hard for me to come down on either side of that one. I mean, I tend to want the windmills because coal is so bad, you know, and coal is what we're replacing right now. 50% of our electricity is coal, so it's a tough one. Which way do you go on it?
As long as they're not in my backyard.
Questions? Comments? Not in my backyard?
Even though I spoke up and I added comment.
Of course.
You know, when I asked you that question about positive, and it says landscape scale, I was actually thinking beyond things like windmills. There are, for example, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there are places, for example, in New Zealand, where corn and soybeans.
Yeah.
I mean, as an example. And what would be really powerful would be if, with artists like you, with the stage that you have, could also find ways to visually communicate that idea. That it's not only a matter of replacing one form of producing with another form, it's also a matter of changing the way we do some daily things so that the amount of energy or the amount of resources we need to use per unit of, let's say, happiness doesn't have to be as much. So some of that can be in terms of changes in the way we build our buildings in our towns and our communities. And if you're spending time in Germany, for example, there are places in Europe, including Germany, where you can take photographs of really beautiful architecture that is 21st century in its appearance. And going back to your question about, is beauty always tied to nostalgia? There's some examples of architecture where it doesn't look quite like things we've lived in before, and yet there's something really attractive about it. Sometimes it's very organic in form, and that would be a way of getting people to start to envision that it's actually not as negative sounding as the gentleman before me was implying in this question. There are ways that we can change both where we get our resources from and then how much we need to use for a unit of daily needs, and I would argue for a unit of happiness.
Well, and it begs a great question. What do we need to be happy? Do we need to leave the lights on? Do we need Charmin toilet paper? Do we need, what? And of course, we know the answer is actually, in some ways, the less we have, the happier we are. I mean, we've based our economy on consumption and disposal, and it hasn't really made us very happy. Yeah, and back to what you were saying about, I have a number of good friends in the environmental world, and one in particular who's very high up at NRDC. I don't know if you know NRDC. And he said, the most important environmental organization in the world today, the Green Building Council. Changing our building codes is possibly the easiest and most effective thing we can do for why are we burning oil to heat our houses? How stupid is that? Geothermal, passive solar, it's easy stuff. And it's craziness. So, yes.
One thing you can do on a personal level is invest in the future now. Like in our house, we have 90% LED lighting, not fluorescent, but LED lighting. I don't think we have any incandescent bulbs in our house. And that costs me personally probably 200 or 300 times as much as if I had all the incandescent lights. And our savings is not seen on the utility bill is dropped, significantly, but I'm not going to see a payback.
No.
I don't care. I'm investing in something that makes a lot more sense to me.
And you're also investing in technology.
Yeah, exactly. I'm supporting new technology, which won't cost that much. When LEDs first came out, they were $40, $50 a bulb, and now you can get them for $7 a bulb for the same amount of.
And they have the same base, so you can put them into any. I need to start. I walk around with the lights off. I'm a little bit crazy, I will admit, but I need to start replacing all of my. I really do. If I have one light on in a room, and when I leave the room, that one light goes off. And I have therefore justified not replacing all of my lights by saying I just don't use light. But it is time that I and I think LED is the better answer than compact fluorescent.
When you go look at the package, they now have information on it. We have to learn a new language. How many lumens are you getting per watt, as in how much light are you getting, and the color spectrum, 2700 on a Kelvin scale, or which is incandescent, or 3000, which I like, which is halogen, or 5000, which is kind of more, which I don't like.
Because it's too white?
No, it's blue.
Well, it's actually, color is all here.
Exactly.
Color is all in the brain. And actually, it's only blue because you're comparing it to a 2700, but 5000 is white. 5000 is daylight colored. Yeah. I'm fascinated. These perception questions are so interesting. the way our brain tricks us. But yeah, for those who don't know, he's talking about the scale, the color scale of light. And there's a rating, tungsten lights like these are 2700, 2800. Daylight, noon sunlight is about 5500. So, and bulbs are rated by this scale. And that's, yeah. But it's very interesting that, you can take a white sheet of paper, and my brain knows that's white, so therefore I see it as white. But it's really not white, it's yellow here. If I take it outside, it's white. But yeah, perception. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I changed my toilet paper 20 years ago. I would beg everybody here to read the label on the back of all 7th generation products, whether it be dish detergent, toilet paper, any of that. I don't allow anything in the house that isn't ecological.
Yeah.
20 years. Sometimes I think, why am I doing this? Is it making a dent? But
It makes a dent.
They will tell you on the back of 7th generation anyway, every household in the United States replace 1 bottle of regular dish detergent, how much oil it saved, how much water.
And that's, the other thing is, we live in a consumerist country, and we're pushed to consume. And a lot of times that means doing things that really aren't that healthy. For instance, soap. It's one of my fixations. What does soap do? It breaks down water tension, right? It breaks the surface tension of water. What are we? We are water. So people, and we're trained to use a lot of soap. I mean, that's the American way, clean, clean, clean. But yet I don't think it's that healthy to use. I see people pouring the dish soap into a dish and washing it, and I think, my God, I wonder, and I don't know this stuff. This is just me sort of torturing myself a little bit.
I've heard people say it's too expensive. The co-op has good sales. You use less, buy better, use less.
No,
regarding windmills, I think they're gorgeous.
I love windmills.
I mean,
And
to me, they represent caring, intelligentsia, civility, and you see the beauty around them, but they represent the future, and we know it's something we have to do to show that we're not locked in a box with the past.
Back to my question about, is beauty tied to nostalgia? If you go to Holland and look at a windmill, you think, oh, it's so beautiful. If you go wherever right next door and you see one of these modern windmills, many people think, oh, it's so horrible. It's very interesting, though. It's, what is beauty? What do we, yeah. And you had a question, yes?
So it seems to me that you're in the business of perception, how to use art or documentary for perception. And thinking about the windmills and thinking about Holland and nostalgia. And there's a beautiful wind farm off the coast of England, the west coast of England, near Manchester. And what we have done to our ridge lines in Vermont in building ski areas and putting up cell phone towers in a whole bunch of ways that we have already had a huge imprint on what our ridge lines look like. To turn around now and say, oh no, I'd rather go full rather than wind is, what's the perception of added value in wind versus full? So I think you're in the business of perception, and I wish you the best of luck to keep changing and influencing our perception.
Thank you. And yeah, I would have to come down on build those. I mean, I'm very much about forest fragmentation also, and that bugs me if they're really fragment. And one of my friends has a place in Vermont, and she's just dead set against the windmills. And but I would come down in favor of the windmills. I really would. And they say, by the way, that the Midwest of the U.S. is the Saudi Arabia of wind. I mean, they say if Obama wanted to build a smart grid. If we would just build a smart grid and build those windmills out in the Midwest, problem solved. I think it's the obstruction that's going on in this country is a real problem. And yes, we will block any progress to gain power. I resent, as a citizen, I resent that. I don't care about a political party, but I do think we need to move forward in this world and not. More comments? Questions? Yes, sir?
Every cell tower ought to be a windmill in my book.
It's actually not a bad idea, is it? Why not?
Well, I'm sure there's interference problems with frequencies, but they can sort that out.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
A lot of your program is about education, and I appreciate that because we buy bacon, but we don't realize the background of it. And if you could talk to more people and get these pictures out in more places, even in supermarkets, you might change the world a bit.
Well, and again, I broke into one of those hog sheds, and they are horrible. And there's so many reasons to be a vegetarian. I'm not a strict vegetarian. I will eat meat occasionally if it's happy meat. But you look at those, and we all know this stuff. We just kind of don't want to know it. Because bacon is so good, right? I mean, come on, who doesn't like that slice of bacon in the morning? But, again, I mean, okay, fine. You want that slice of bacon? I'll bet there's a farmer near here who's got nice, happily raised pigs that would. And so what if you pay twice the price, right? I want to pay twice the price. Really, please give me expensive food. I want to make a farmer happy. And yeah. But yes, I've made a number of vegetarians with that pig fetus shot. It's a very effective picture. And it's really, there's if you want to read the whole story about hog farming, there's a great article in Rolling Stone. And there's these giant lagoons of waste are very toxic. There's the guy who, I love good writing. The guy who wrote the story is really Jeff Biggers, I think, if I remember correctly. And his recitation of this incident is so funny. But he recites, and I'm from the South, so I can use the word redneck, okay? Let's just make that clear. These rednecks were down there, and one of them slipped and fell into this waste lagoon and died. And his brother went to get him, and he slips and falls in and dies. And it goes on like, and the way he wrote it, the progression, the build-up was perfect. And of course, that's what as I'm like leaning out over the edge of the bank to take this picture, I'm thinking of that. I'm thinking of the people who slipped into these things, and yes. And there was no one else around because the guy who was leading me wouldn't stay. The guy who was driving me, he was a local activist, a colored man, a black man, and of course this is the Deep South, so and it's a real racial issue also. This because the hog farming, of course, is done next to the houses of these people of color. So, but he wouldn't stay, so he dropped me off and said he would come back, and so there I was, all by myself, leaning out over this hog waste lagoon, thinking, well, it's going to be a great shot, but if I fall in, it's all over. You had, yes, ma'am?
So I was wondering how many people saw this project and what kind of audience did you have so far?
How many people have seen it? It's hard to say. It's been in a lot of places. But, it goes to, I have exhibits, I have it in magazines, and it's always a little different, whether it's an article, the hog story ran in, it'll come back to me, which magazine it ran in. So it's always, each configuration is a little different, so it's impossible to say how many people have, and I did this opera in Weimar, 1,000 people were subjected to Gustav Mahler and my pictures. So a lot of people, but never enough. And of course, part of the problem is often the people that see it are already predisposed to thinking this way.
That's exactly so. Because I was wondering, you talked about changing, right? You said that a lot of things are changing, and I kind of agree. But you know how, since you said also that Americans is, it's so difficult to really live in your daily life this changing, right? To be part of the change. So I was wondering if kids saw this exhibition, if you went to schools, because I mean, they are the future. They should be, sensitive about these issues in order to be really effective. Because he has a lot of art, this project, I think, but I think kids need to be exposed to this as well.
Yeah.
Because adults, as you said, they are already predisposed to
They're
see it.
dinosaurs.
So, exactly. So.
Yeah, I get it into schools as much as I love going into schools. And as an artist, I need to be in galleries, but as an educator, I really want to be in community centers and schools and yeah. Where are you from? Brazil? From Italy, sorry. I was curious about where in Italy?
I'm from Sicily, but I live in Milan.
I'm gonna go this winter and shoot in Carbonia in Sardinia. There's a giant aluminum refinery that I'm gonna go shoot this. Yeah.
Have you published your work as a whole in a book, or maybe?
Yeah, I've got a book out. There's a copy of it upstairs. I should send you a couple copies to sell, actually. Yeah, there's a nice book by, and I'm really honored. And lazy. Did I say that? I'm very lazy, and so I had this brilliant idea: get someone else to write the book for you. So I got some really great writers to write essays in the book, and it was a real honor, the people that contributed to the book. I'm very proud of it. As a first book, it's not a bad effort.
Are there any available online?
Oh yeah, you can get it on Amazon. Cheaper than I actually bought it from the publisher. Oh God. I shipped a bunch of books to Germany, and by the time they got there, I had paid about double what it would have cost me to just order them on Amazon in Germany. Well, lesson learned, huh? Any more questions? Comments? Time to go?
Just I was wondering, out of curiosity, how did you end up going on a plane to take these pictures?
Because I'm crazy.
Well, who pays for that? I'll be direct.
I pay for it. But many of my pilots volunteer their plane in themselves. So a lot of them won't even let me pay for the gas. Usually I insist to pay for the gas. But I'm very lucky. I have a number of pilots that like what I do and fly me all over the country. So yeah. And even in Germany and hopefully in Italy, we'll see. I will report back. I'm also going to go shoot Mestre.
Where?
Mestre?
Oh yeah, Mestre. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, give me a call if you're in Italy.
Have you ever thought of a hot air balloon? Those are great.
Yeah, I had an environmental group in Bremen that wanted me to shoot from a balloon, but it wouldn't work. Even the kite I was telling you about was a nuisance because it was so blown around by the wind. You have to be able to really get in a position and be there and then circle around and get there again. And a balloon just wouldn't. I'd love to go up in a balloon, but it wouldn't do what I need to do. All right, thank you very much.